Hi, Ashley.
Hi, I'm ready to go when you are.
Okay, I am ready to go and we have a full agenda, so I'm gonna get us going. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm gonna call the Public Works and Mobility Committee to order. We continue to meet virtually. Let's quickly share that page for citizen engagement. You can always find more information on how to participate by going to the City of Missoula Meetings tab and agendas. And you can always leave a voice message for City Council with your comments by calling 406-552-6012 or emailing council@ci.missoula.mt.us. Thank you, Ashley. Next, let's do a roll call for attendance, please.
Anderson,
Present.
Becerra,
Present.
Carlino,
Present.
Contos,
Here.
Hess, Jones, Jordan,
Present.
Nugent,
Present.
Savage,
Present.
Cheryl, Vasika,
Present.
West. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. And Ms. Jones will be attending by phone. So if we see a phone number there, please do let her in. Okay, with that, we have minutes to approve from June 8th. Are there any changes to the minutes? Okay, seeing none, those will stand approved and they'll be on our consent agenda. I will do a quick take a quick look at our public attendance to see if anyone has any comments on items that are not on the agenda. Please do let us know by raising your virtual hand. Okay, seeing none. We will move to our first item on the agenda, and that is the South Sussex Bypass right-of-way and public utility easement vacation, and Brant is here to present. So take it away.
Thank you. Share my screen. Okay, hello everyone. I'm Brant Dolan with Public Works and Mobility Surface Transportation Engineering. Today I'm going to be talking about the proposed South Sussex Bypass right-of-way and public access easement vacation. This is a petition request from WGM Group on behalf of Casa Loma LLC to vacate public right-of-way and public utility easement in the 900 block of South Avenue West. This block is bordered by Stevens Avenue, West Sussex Avenue, Holborn Street, and South Avenue West. And this area is just north of Sentinel High School. South Sussex Bypass was installed in 2005 to help improve the Brooks South Russell intersection, also known as Malfunction Junction. The intersection improvements will be installed at both South and Stevens and Sussex and Stevens to maintain flow on the new traffic route. And this vacation will provide a more usable rectangle area for development as opposed to two triangular units. This is the exhibit for the right-of-way vacation that WGM has prepared. The right-of-way vacation is depicted in blue and the public access easement vacation is depicted in red. This is a preliminary plan for intersection and other right-of-way improvements that are required conditions and provide public benefit in exchange for the vacated right-of-way. The city has produced 8 conditions of approval. These include requirements such as the design and installation of intersection and other right-of-way improvements, dealing with the present and future utilities on the parcel, and the dependence of the route designation change, any easements or right-of-way required to be granted, and affordable housing requirements. One thing we want to make sure of is that the bypass remains open until transportation infrastructure improvements are constructed that will provide safe and convenient movements for a reroute. Now I'd like to turn it over to Aaron Wilson to talk a little bit about the Department of Transportation urban route system designation that needs to be amended.
Yeah, thanks, Brant. So this section of Sussex that's being requested for right-of-way vacation is on the state's urban highway system. It's designated as a collector, I believe, through this section, and is on that federal aid eligible route. Part of that redesignation or designation as the urban highway was a result of, as Brant mentioned, there was the Brook South Russell reconfiguration that created this spur. That was an MPO or federal aid project. There were some federal funds used for that. And as a result of that project, there were a number of changes about 15 years ago to the urban system, which reclassified Sussex as part of the urban system, and it was federally functionally classified as a collector. Some other streets that were included in that on this map, you can see essentially all the colored streets are part of the urban highway system. So in order to vacate the right-of-way, this street section first has to be removed from the urban system, sort of a process that we can't vacate a right-of-way that's part of that urban system without going through the process to make sure that it's not going to impact the rest of the federal aid urban highway system. So a couple of things there are a couple of steps. So it has to be done prior to the right-of-way vacation. So that's why that is one of the conditions that staff is recommending. The request also typically comes to remove this from the urban system would come from the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, as well as a resolution from the city agreeing to take on all the maintenance responsibilities. It's a local street, so we're already maintaining this. It's just currently federal aid eligible and would no longer be eligible as once it's removed. Because there are requirements for connectivity in the urban highway system, you'll see that what's circled here is the requested vacation, but there is some additional urban route that extends on Sussex out to Brooks. And in order to maintain the connectivity of the urban highway system, we would request to remove that section as well. There's a couple of ways we can move forward with this in terms of changing the urban system. One is just to remove Sussex between South and Brooks altogether, just take it off the urban system, which would allow us to do the right-of-way vacation. The city's already maintaining this street. And it's a fairly straightforward process of making that request. It goes to the Transportation Commission and along with MDT's recommendation and the request from the MPO and the city. And then that's essentially all the action that once it's approved by the Transportation Commission, it's removed from the maps and we're basically done with that piece. The other option or something that we could look at as part of this is looking at redesignating Stevens between South and Sussex. So that north-south section that's just to the west of the Sussex Bend as part of the urban system. So you would still have that route that would go from South to Sussex out to Brook Street as part of that broader Brook South Russell reroute and redesign. In order to functionally reclassify Stevens as a collector or arterial in order to be eligible for the designation on the urban highway system, that has to go through some additional review. There's analysis that has to be done to make sure that it qualifies as a collector or arterial, and just having to show the relative influence of it on the urban system in order for that to get redesignated to have that route. So there's a couple of ways we can go about it. We can just remove completely, or we can essentially shift the urban route to Stevens from the Sussex Bend. We have had a number of conversations with MDT, and it's our preference, and what we're going to recommend to TPCC for the MPO request is to do this in sort of a two-stage process. The first stage is removing this route from the urban system, so Sussex between South Avenue and Brooks, as a first step to allow the right-of-way vacation to go through, assuming the city approves that and everything moves forward. And then we would propose to come back to evaluating the functional classification and eligibility for the urban system of the Stevens to Sussex to Brooks sort of change at a later date when we do. There's a couple of opportunities. One is the statewide functional classification review that is MDT is undertaking right now. They've sort of delayed that for a little while, so it gives us some time to really evaluate this and make sure that it's going to fit into those requirements. We could also do a separate process where we really look at the urban system citywide. We know there are some other streets that we might want to recommend adding to the urban highway system, such as Mary Jane Boulevard and George Elmer as part of the build grant, looking at potential expanded urbanized area as a result of the 2020 census. So all of these things, we want to look at theoretically, holistically throughout the MPO area. So that would give us a couple of opportunities to relook at this section and potentially pull that portion of Sussex between Stevens and Brooks, and then Stevens between South and Sussex back into the urban system at a later date. So that's sort of what we're proposing through the MPO, and we're hoping to get TPCC action on that next week at their meeting, depending on how conversations go with this right-of-way vacation. So that said, there will be an MPO action that we'll take, but we also have an attached resolution that you'll note that is essentially just indicating the city's intent to vacate that right of way and to remove this section of street from the urban system, and that we are the city is agreeing to all of the maintenance and costs associated with that in terms of removing it from federal aid eligible route. So I think that's a summary. If there are any questions about this, I know it can seem kind of convoluted, all the steps that we have to go through, but this is just one of them. And ultimately it's fairly straightforward. And I think the resolution outlines what we hope to do, and we'll move that forward, assuming the city is intent on vacating the right of way. Back to you, Brant.
Thanks, Aaron. So the alley of this block was vacated in 1975 for resolution 3465, but the underlying 20-foot wide utility easement remains. WGM has already done a good job of coordinating with the city and other present utility companies to either abandon unnecessary utilities or relocate the ones that are still desired. They are proposing to provide new public utility easement on the north and west sides of the block for any relocated utilities. So we recommend that you adopt a resolution calling for the removal of a portion of Sussex Avenue from the Missoula urban highway system, and adopt a resolution of intention to vacate the public right-of-way and public utility easement. Now I believe WGM will talk some more about this project.
Thank you, Brent. I realize that I did probably not a good enough job at giving you all some background on this and why it's before us. So let me just do that before I turn it over to WGM. This is before us today because it's an essential component to a development that's being proposed for this section. This is a multi-layered process, and we have all the pertinent agencies and organizations that are proposing or driving this development, and it will all fit together once you hear that part of this process. How this right-of-way vacation is essential in making that development come to fruition, and the affordability requirements that are attached to that development. So it's a little bit of land use in public works and mobility, only because much like in the past, how we have reviewed right-of-way vacations for a development as part of the land use decision and the conditions attached to a development. That's what we're doing here today. So I just wanted to give you the broader context for why we're talking about this right-of-way vacation. So with that, I will pass it on to WGM to present on this proposal.
Thank you. My name is Stephen McDaniel with WGM Group, along with Jeff Smith, also at WGM Group, and Nate Richmond as one of the developers. We've prepared a slideshow that I think I can get going here with a quick screen share. All right, is everyone seeing that?
Yep.
All right, I'm going to let Jeff start off on this.
Thanks, Stephen. Stephen said, Jeff Smith with WGM Group here representing Casa Loma. Grateful for all of your time today, consideration, and also your service on council. The next slide, please, Stephen. Thanks. This vacation request would facilitate a significant infill development. It's a rare opportunity to redevelop an entire block in Midtown. The realignment of the Sussex Bend cut through reconsolidates the 900 block of South Avenue and facilitates a mixed-use project on the site of the old Casa Loma Roadhouse. Proposed transportation improvements reestablish the grid network, create safer intersections for vehicles, bikes, pedestrians, and school buses, while improving connectivity between the neighborhood, fairgrounds, and Missoula County Public Schools, and also creating a gateway for the neighborhood and fairgrounds. This location and the proposed project type fit very well with the focus inward goals of the community, also the stated goals of the Brook Street Corridor Study and the Brook Street BRT plan, each of which calls for focusing high-density residential development in Midtown. Project also includes a meaningful mixed-use component. We think that's noteworthy as well here. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, the project location is the entirety of the 900 block of South Avenue, centrally located in Midtown, but currently undeveloped and unused. Block's well connected and very walkable with services nearby and great access to public transit. Mountain Line Route 1, which is a bolt route with service every 15 minutes, has 2 stops within short walking distance of this site. By focusing dense residential development here in the urban core rather than on the fringes, we're creating an opportunity to reduce total vehicle miles traveled by Missoulians each day. Also an opportunity to reduce congestion on the overall transportation network by locating homes right in the urban center. Look at the next slide, please. Some historic context. That's an aerial photo from 1937 when the old Casa Loma Roadhouse, circled in red there, was located out on the edge of town near the fairgrounds. That original roadhouse burnt down in the late 40s and was replaced with that the building that's on site today. Next slide, please. It's an overview of the development proposal. Casa Loma Group is proposing a mixed-use development consisting of over 130 much-needed housing units. 20% of the rental units in the project are proposed as rent-restricted affordable units at 80% of AMI. That's just over 20 rent-restricted units. And over 18,000 square feet of commercial mixed-use space is proposed on the ground floor. Proposed building promotes good urban design, holds the corners on South Avenue well on both ends of the block. Next slide, please. This current configuration, the 2 triangular parcels are very difficult to develop in a meaningful way. See that cut through, bisects that block. The next slide, please. The realignment of the Sussex Bend cut through, the opportunity to create residential density with a meaningful affordable component and a mixed use component becomes possible. Really excited about this project and the opportunity it presents for public benefit through creating housing in the right location with affordable housing and the opportunity to improve transportation safety and network connectivity. This project fits well with the goals of a place to call home. Also fits nicely with a voluntary incentives program that Emily Harris Shears shared at the Committee of the Whole last month. One interesting note, I think, if we anticipate that the rental units turn over every 3 years on average or so, total of over 200 households will benefit from this affordable housing during the period of affordability, which is, I believe, proposed to be 35 years. That's actually closer to 240 households during that period. Stephen, can you take this next section?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. So I think, some of the people that talked before me kind of hit on this, but we've been working with the developers for the last year and a half, if not more, to kind of define this public process, because this project is more complicated. It's got the land use aspects, it's got the transportation network coordination that we're going through right now. So what we've done today, we've met with a lot of people at the city, a lot of different groups, MRA, Public Works Committee, Mountain Line. We've been in front of the MPO. Everyone is well versed in this process. So we're looking right now at the right-of-way vacation. We've already got conditional approval on the TIF request. So we've got the funding to build this public infrastructure. Aaron alluded, we've already coordinated on the MDT system change. And Brant alluded that we've already done a lot of the utility relocation coordination with the utility companies. So right now we're in front of you with the right-of-way vacation, and then looking forward upon conditional approval here. We're hopeful that we can start on the right-of-way improvements in the building program. So the right-of-way vacation, as you've seen this already, so I won't go into too much depth. We're looking at vacating the right-of-way on the cut through. That's approximately 22,000 square feet of right-of-way to be vacated, and then setting up the utility and public access, non-motorized public access easements on the borders of the property, which would be approximately 8,000 square feet. The right-of-way improvements in the area that we're looking at are the roundabout at South and Stevens, and then a stop controlled intersection at the intersection of Stevens and Sussex. This will reestablish the grid network. Will complete missing pieces of sidewalk along the frontages of Sussex and Holborn on this block. WGM was working with MRA a few years ago, or a couple years ago, when this project was in its infancy. And we were actually going to design and build those sidewalks, and we said, let's hold off and do it holistically. So that's just another item of coordination that we've already been in the works with the city on. The reduced crossing distances associated with the roundabout will improve the connectivity north-south across the neighborhood, as well as east and west across the neighborhood, and really connect the commercial and residential uses north of south with the public infrastructure to the south. That is the fairgrounds and the parks and the high school. In meeting with MCPS, we believe that the roundabout at South and Stevens will provide much better ingress and egress for bus traffic, specifically the southbound lefts at the intersections of South and Stevens. We'll improve the sight lines at Sussex and Stevens. Historically, there was a crash trend there when it was first built, and then they implemented a always stop at that intersection, which did address the crash trend, but the angles at that intersection currently are less than desirable. And then we have the ability to extend the bicycle facilities that were just recently built at the fairgrounds. So we've got the fairgrounds commuter trails that just navigate through the fairgrounds, but kind of end at the intersection of South and Stevens. We have the ability to connect those to the north with this project through either a combination of a trail along the project's border or a cycle track, a two-way cycle track on the street. And then with coordination through the city, we've identified a water main improvements within Stevens. So one of the nice things about this project that is that it's so centrally located. And when we're so centrally located to an existing gridded network, that means traffic as it's coming or going from the site is evenly dispersed across numerous streets. So that what that means is that we don't have, that it's kind of an older model now, but where you have subdivisions that are, a lot of circuitous streets that all come to one intersection, thinking, out towards Mullen. If you've got a large subdivision and it hits Mullen at one intersection, that intersection tends to degrade and become less safe. The nice thing about developing meaningful development and that's centrally located is you can disperse that traffic across numerous intersections. And this is just kind of a graphic that shows how many intersections that we can disperse our traffic through. So we're not going to overload just one. And with that being said, This is the anticipated increase or decrease in delay at the intersections. So we coordinated with MDT and the city on which intersections we needed to study with this development, and these were the intersections identified. So we've got South and Brooks, we have less than a second of delay added. Sussex and Brooks, again, less than a second of delay. South and Stevens, we actually are going to improve operations even with the added traffic. And that's because a roundabout will handle that traffic better. So all of these intersections have very minor impacts. The intersection of Sussex Avenue and Stevens Avenue, we looked at early on in the project, trying to accommodate maybe a roundabout at that location. It's not really feasible at this location, mainly due to the existing urban form. We've got 3 of the corners at that location that are already developed, and the installation of a roundabout at that location would require significant impacts to those buildings. However, early on in the project, we did analyze it under what we would typically refer to as a 2-way stop control, but because one of the legs is one way, we're referring to it as a single stop sign on Sussex. And actually it'll improve the operations at the intersection, so delays should go down. We will have 420 northbound left turning vehicles, but when we look at the capacity of this intersection, there's ample capacity for those northbound lefts based on all the conflicting movements, which is primarily the southbound through movement. That northbound left will have a capacity of 1,245 vehicles per hour. So we're not even approaching it being a congested situation. As we talk about bicycle infrastructure or multimodal infrastructure, in order to facilitate a stop sign on Sussex, we would propose a shared use path along the east side of Stevens. And this would remove any non-motorized traffic from, or any conflicts of the northbound lefts with that non-motorized traffic, and we would be able to navigate that roundabout to the south in a safe way. We also analyzed this as an always stop control. This option provides a balanced operation, so we do experience delay on the northbound left and delay on the south, but it improves the delay on the Sussex leg. And then we could either facilitate the non-motorized traffic with the continuation of a shared use path on the east side, or we could run a cycle track on the west side. I think if we were to think about how the intersection operates today, an always stop control would be perfectly acceptable. If we're thinking that we're going to have larger traffic growth in the future, then we may want to switch it to a single stop sign. And that could be achieved with a simple striping change, and it's not a major infrastructure investment. So we've already hit this slide. And then as we're looking at what the intersection of South and Stevens looks like, you can see the upper left is the existing intersection configuration. And it's really kind of almost that 1970s era intersection where you've got not great multimodal facilities. I think the city's done a pretty good job of getting bike lanes added to this route over the years, but we see narrow sidewalks, curbside sidewalks, wide crossings. That crosswalk that you see that's striped with a ladder bar that is adjacent to major pedestrian attractions of the fairgrounds and the schools is 70 feet long, which is way longer than we want. And then if you look at the bottom right, this is a roundabout of similar scale. It's the exact same size. We pulled an image from Bozeman at 11th and College, just to kind of give you guys an illustration of how the intersection will look and operate. And you can see it's just much more friendly from a pedestrian scale and a multimodal scale, as well as handling even traffic operations better than the existing intersection. So I'm not going to reiterate all of these community goals. I think Jeff did a really good job of that at the beginning of the presentation, but this development, this proposal that we've come up with does hit a lot of our community goals, focus inward, removing blighted block of Midtown, mixed use, removing triangular shapes that will give us that higher density that we want. And this is kind of, I've already hit on this a little bit too, but the coordination to date, we started back in 2019 with the feasibility study, which I kind of covered. We've met with MDT, we've met with the city, met with the utility companies. We got conditional approval of the TIF request, submitted the right-of-way vacation to the city and have their support. And then we got TTAC approval this month. So hopefully trying to get some momentum with you guys to move forward with that right-of-way vacation. And as I said, next steps are continuing the work to remove the Sussex cut through from the MDT urban system, working with Aaron and his group, and then, working with you guys to finalize the right-of-way vacation, knowing that it has to happen kind of concurrently with everything else, but does have to happen before we finalize that or after we remove that piece from the urban system. So with that, I will stop my screen share and open it up to questions.
Thank you. Could you touch a little bit on the neighborhood outreach and the outcome of that? Any major concerns or issues that were brought up, perhaps?
Yeah, thank you. No major concerns. Everybody that we've met with, which are primarily the landowners adjacent to the development, are supportive of the project. We've met with MCPS, and obviously they get better access and safer ingress and egress for their buses, which is a major bonus. And then if I'm going to actually jump back into a screen share here and show one more item that they highlighted that they were really appreciative of. So right now, this island, can you guys see my mouse? I don't know if you can. Yeah, okay. So this island down here terminates prior to the intersection, and they're having students coming in the morning and kind of making a U-turn and parking in these parking stalls down on the south side of the street. So they're really appreciative of the median continuing, and then they have to make the U-turn at the intersection, which will actually be a safer movement. The county is excited for it. They see the county fairgrounds have been excited for it. They see the benefit of the added access north-south in and out of their site.
Great, thank you. Okay, questions from council. I see Daniel, go ahead.
Thanks. So I know that it's the industry standard to suggest 35 years of affordability, but I'm just curious, like, why we don't ask for a longer affordability time, because I believe the building will definitely be there after 35 years. And I mean, it might be a similar situation like we had with the bridge apartments, where we had to use tax money 2 different times to secure affordability. So why don't, like, did the negotiations start at 35, or did we ask for 70 years, or is it a good meeting to try and ask for a longer period of time instead of 35 years?
Do we have, I think we have Emily Hershier present. I'm not sure, Emily, if you can answer that or.
Hi. Yeah, I can answer that.
Great.
So we did, actually the period of affordability started at 30 years in the discussion. And based on the policies in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, we advocated for it to match that as a consideration of a maximum investment, essentially. And so we recommended 35 years. The reason we set the period of affordability at 35 years is that's really the reasonable life of a building when it's expected and anticipated that a building will need repairs, that it will need reinvestment. And because the developers are taking a profit loss essentially in developing this project to do some portion of it as income restricted, we know that that may be challenging for them to have the cash flow to do those repairs without possibly a subsequent investment. And so we set that at 35 years so that projects can be essentially preserved and receive repairs that would then protect the period of affordability again, if that's the route that they want to go. And that is really kind of our, it's both the industry standard and what we've been advised on as in our policy development.
Thanks, Emily. Mike, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of questions. Full disclosure, I have business relationships with all of the applicants and I operate a business on South Avenue, but I have no financial interest. So I just wanted to let the record show that there's no conflict. I appreciate the information about the reasons a roundabout won't work at the Sussex and Stevens intersection. That was actually very helpful. I'm curious, I guess I have a question that I think I know the answer to, and then I have some follow-ups. So the developer or the applicant in this scenario is going to pay for the roundabout as part of this approval, is that correct?
Yes, originally, yes, they will pay for it as part of this project, but they will be reimbursed by MRA.
Okay, so they will be reimbursed by MRA, so they got a grant, they got a, but that's considered a development cost. So the MRA is a separate thing.
So yeah, so we went to MRA and got approval of the TIF financing to build all of the public infrastructure for this project. The development will pay for that originally, and then MRA will reimburse them for those costs up to the approved amount of the agreement.
Yeah, I mean, I understand how that works. But before you asked the MRA for reimbursement money, somebody told you had to put a roundabout in, correct?
It was part of our feasibility study and the development proposal.
Okay. I might have a follow-up question on that, but I need to check on something. Thank you.
Okay. Stephen, could you share what the maximum amount of TIF funding is for this project, or what you requested?
Just give me a minute to look that number up, please. Actually, Annie's on board. She might have that. I just saw her hand get raised.
Great. Annie, you can unmute if you can.
Good afternoon, Annie Gorski, Deputy Director with the MRA. The approval that the MRA board made in May was an up to $2.21 million. And that is for, I'll just pull up the recommendation here. That includes deconstruction, removal of a structure on site, public right-of-way improvements, and utility relocation. And I say up to because that's based on final receipts and payment that is made for those improvements. So after full payment, they then need to come to the MRA, they present those receipts, evidence that the work has been completed, and then we reimburse based on that.
Thanks, Annie. And this is the percentage of TIF funding is pretty standard. The allocation that usually comes out of MRA in terms of TIF funding, in terms of the total amount of the cost of the project.
Correct. The total project cost is right around $30 million. So the ratio is $1 of TIF to every $13. You know, it's 1 to 13 is the ratio. Correct. And that's very, very typical. Yes.
Great. Thank you. Let's see. I can't remember. Daniel, your hand was up first. Go ahead.
Thanks. I just had two questions, if that's okay. I was gonna, so we're expecting about 130 units with 20% set aside for affordable. So that's about 26 units we're expecting, and we're expecting up to 2.2 million in TIF funds. So that leaves us at about $85,000 of TIF funds per unit affordable for 35 years. Is that correct?
So Jeff, did you want to chime in?
I was just going to clarify the calculation on the number of affordable units. So we're proposing 20% of the rental units as affordable, which out of that number is 22. So 22 units for that period of affordability.
So I guess my question would be, so that would leave us at about $100,000 of TIF funds per unit affordable for the 35-year period time. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And then my other question was how we came up with the 20% number, because that is a pretty big public investment along with the right of way. And I would like to see us push for more units affordable. I'd like to see 30% rather than 20. And I'm curious if we could hear a little bit more insight on how we got to that number to help me understand.
Sure. Ashley, are you prepared to answer that? I know that that's what we have done in the past for similar projects that were conditioned in terms of a percentage of affordability.
I can speak to that. Were you asking me?
You, Annie, or Emily?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So one of the something to keep in mind here is just the cost environment in which the development is experiencing right now. So I know the applicant is on the call as well, but costs are significant. I think this is what the project is able to afford. While we are giving a significant TIF investment, this is, they are rebuilding the streets surrounding the site. They are, there's significant public improvement that's required for this project.
Thank you. Emily, do you have anything else to add to that? I don't mean to put you on the spot. I know that this is Aaron and Montana's wheelhouse, but I know that in the past, that's what we have required of other projects such as the Reed on 4th Street and I can't remember what other project, but it seems to me like it's pretty standard.
That's right. Yeah, that's the consistent approach we've been using. And I think I just want to name that this is one project in the portfolio of development engagement that we're doing, which is so meaningful. And it's hard to ask one project to do it all. And so I think as we continue to build this bench and portfolio, we'll see an abundance or more, income restricted units across the city. And that's really meaningful, but just want to highlight that we don't expect one project to meet all of our goals.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to keep moving along here. Mike, go ahead.
Thanks. I don't know how to word this question, so I'm just going to kind of put it out there and hopefully somebody can jump in. It seems like abandoning the curve through the middle of the block and sending traffic up south to take a free right-hand turn on a Stevens is pretty minimal impact to the intersection of Stevens and South. And it would appear more that the benefit of the roundabout is really for the fairgrounds and MCPS more so than the impact of this development. And I just wonder, and MRA already having said they pay for the infrastructure kind of sets the path that maybe the city wants to take on this. But I just wonder if rather than asking the developers to put in a roundabout, we shouldn't have gone Daniel's route and asked for more affordable housing with the same funds. And I know that once MRA gets involved, you can't pay for them the same way, but it seems like this decision's already baked before we really get to consider it. And I'm just curious if somebody from the city side can speak to that.
Let's see, who am I looking for from city. Could we take down the shared screen just so I can see everyone's hands, please? Thank you. Do we have maybe Jeremy Keene in?
I think Jeremy and Annie could speak to it.
Yes.
Thank you. I can try to speak to that question. So it's certainly a good question. And I think there were two considerations there. One is that we saw that there were other wider public benefits to doing a roundabout at this location, not solely for this project, but it also benefited the school and transportation connectivity for non-motorized, the fairgrounds access, new butterfly house, all those things that were mentioned. And so there's a broader public benefit there. I think because the TIF money is limited to public investments, it would be difficult maybe to shift that money into other things. And so this was a good way to support the project, get those other wider public benefits, and also utilize the TIF money. If we tried to do the roundabout through other funding mechanisms, it would be a long, long time before we'd be able to do it. It's not of the level of project that would raise to the top of our list in the immediate future. So that was what's behind the thinking in supporting the roundabout and the current funding and the way it's structured.
Follow up?
Yep, go ahead.
I appreciate that. And I do know, having worked in the neighborhood, that the roundabout has been something the fairground has wanted for a while. So I understand the need for it, but kind of what you just said, how if we weren't doing it associated to this project, it wouldn't be a high priority. It kind of answers the question. And I don't think we're going to be able to change it here, but just in the way that we present these, it's something that I might want to discuss moving forward, because we do have a housing crisis right now, and we do need a priority on housing. So I struggle with this, but I like the bigger concept. So I appreciate your answer.
Thank you. Sandra, go ahead.
Thanks. I was just wondering if you still needed a motion.
We do. Would you like to
I
make the
will be
motion?
happy. I'll be happy to make that motion.
Thank you. So we have a motion on the floor. I believe our new rules call for public comment on the motion first. And then we can go back to council. Anyone in the audience wanting to provide comment on this item, on the motion? Okay, we will go back to council. Stacy.
Thanks so much, Madam Chair. I'm sorry, I was like flipping to the screen. I have a couple of questions, but first I'd really like some procedural clarification on, this is a really big project that obviously we will have multiple steps and hearing in various committees. So it does seem like we have some further questions around, are we maximizing resources to get the most leverage in terms of affordability, and the various components that go into paying for this. And I just want to make sure that my, questions and comments are kind of appropriate to what the discussion point is right now. So right now we are vacating the right of way. It's a two-step process, removing it and then intention to vacate. And then if anybody could give a little bit more clarity on what the further steps will be and when they will come before council, so that we just kind of understand where our decision points are going to be and where opportunities to make any changes, if warranted or appropriate, would be.
Yeah, and the way I understand this, and I'm looking at Jeremy Keene to correct me if I'm wrong, but this will not be going to land use and planning because it doesn't have to. So we are looking at the right-of-way vacation and the conditions that we can attach to that vacation. And those conditions are for a component of affordability with this development. Did I get that right, Jeremy?
And I see that Ryan has his hand up, and maybe he can jump in on that question.
Yeah, I did want to jump in. This is a little bit funkier than the standard vacation proceeding because the city acquired this piece of property in 2004 in fee simple before it became right of way. So typically when we vacate right of way, the adjacent property owners take title to it just by automatically by operation of law, unless there's some evidence that there was it should be handled differently. And this is one of those cases that's handled differently. So the city will, after the vacation resolution is recorded, it just becomes city property that the city then, city council has complete authority over in determining how it's alienated or conveyed. So I do think that you can put the conditions on it as part of the vacation here, and we'll just carry those forward through. But there will be another separate city council approval that's required either at the same time that the final vote is taken on, you've got the resolution of intention, you go through the hearing, and then you finally vote on it. There'll be another city council action required to actually convey the property to the Casa Loma LLC or anybody else. And at that point, there's also, the ability to put conditions on that. So you could enter into a purchase and sale agreement for the property that memorializes the conditions that are stated in the vacation, or as they may be amended by city council through either of the proceedings.
Great. So the motion that we have before us right now is to set a public hearing. And I'm hoping that we can continue this conversation prior to that hearing. And if we need to answer any questions related to the affordability component, or answer any other questions that staff may have, that we will have the opportunity to do so. With that, Stacey.
Can I have a follow-up, Madam Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, sorry, didn't interrupt. Didn't know if you're coming back to me. I appreciate, Ryan, I understand developing in the middle of an entire city block in downtown Missoula is not going to be an easy one. My question is to Jeff, and I apologize if your presentation already went through this, but if you could just give us a breakdown of the various unit typing that will be a part of this project, because I don't want to get lost in just the affordable units, because I realize that this will have a much bigger community impact in terms of just overall inventory. So if you wouldn't mind, so that I make sure I have that written down correctly.
Yeah, thanks for that, Stacy. Certainly a mix of units and rental and for sale. And I'm actually going to kick that over to Nate Richmond, if you wouldn't mind discussing the mix, Nate. Nate's on the call here as well.
Sure, thanks, Jeff. And my name is Nate Richmond, and I'm a member of Casa Loma LLC, also the president and CEO of Blue Line Development. And as most of you know, we have a strong commitment to affordable housing in Missoula and in the region. In fact, we're currently developing 402 affordable units in Missoula with the Villaggio and Trinity projects. Those will serve people with 60% of the area median income and below. And with this development, we're trying to target basically the missing middle in Missoula. So we're looking at some different income levels. We've proposed that our 20% of the restricted rental units be at 80% area median income. I believe the previous restrictions that have been imposed for right-of-way vacations have only targeted 120% of the area median income and below. So we're doing some deeper income targeting with the 20%. Right now, we're modeling 107 rental units and 25 for sale units. We have our for sale units in our model. Obviously, we still have to price out construction, but those are anywhere from 90 to 120% of the area median income as a for sale unit. So we're trying to make this entire development more affordable than market. I also want to point out that 20% of the rental units has a income reduction on the rental housing of about $200,000 per year. So there is a significant give on this. When we do those 20% rental units, we're losing about $200,000 a year in rental income. But that's it for the breakdown right now. We have the architects doing. We have a massing study. The architects are doing more design, and we'll have to go out to bid and see where our construction numbers come back in. But I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you, Nate.
May I kind of just, I'm sorry, I don't mean to dominate. I just have one follow-up to Nate on just sorry. Okay, so thank you. Super really helpful. But on the 107, if 22 of them are deed restricted affordable, that leaves, oh my God, I'm doing math on the fly here. I think 85 that are just rent. Is that also have a targeted income specification or until deed restricted
AMI?
affordable?
Yeah, right now we have all the balance of those units are targeted 120% and below AMI.
Okay, so the entire project is really an affordable housing project, not just the 22 units that are.
That's our intent. We've been real cautious to put a restriction on that, given the construction climate right now. If we may have to take a percentage of the units and increase the sales price or increase the rental costs if our construction bids come back through the roof. So that's our reluctance to commit to the entire project being affordable. But to date, Blue Line has done over 3,000 affordable units that have all, and everything we've done to date has been affordable housing.
Thank you, Nate. But so just to be clear, at least 22 of the rental units will be for people earning 80% AMI, at 80% AMI. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Sandra, go ahead.
Thanks. My internet's unstable. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I had a question and a comment. So you guys were, I guess, Mirta, you said that this is setting the public hearing, but in the recommended motion, I didn't see anything about a public hearing. Do we need to reword that motion?
The recommended motion
Unless I read it wrong.
for a shown in subject to set a public hearing for July 18th. So it's
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's my mistake. And then also, I guess it doesn't really count for this project because they want to make everything affordable. But I was going to chime in and respectfully counter with what Daniel said, because I was going to ask for less affordable units because with each affordable unit usually drives up the price of every other unit, thus making those even more unaffordable. But that was just my 2 cents. So I will be in support of this.
Thank you. Daniel and then Mike.
Yeah, I'm happy to support the public hearing motion, but I would like to see more units. At least since the rest of them are supposed to be to 120% area median income, I'd like to see us maybe have something in writing about that, or at least just try and request more set aside affordable, because the market's going to go up and then maybe those units will go up and we don't really have an agreement on them. Yeah, just I'm having a hard time getting past the $100,000 of TIF funds per affordable unit for 35 years affordability, but I'll support the motion for the public hearing for now.
Okay, thank you. And I do need someone to clarify for me. The recommended motion looks like it's 3 parts. One is calling to adopt a resolution calling for the removal of Sussex Avenue between South Avenue and Brook Street from the Missoula urban area highway system. So that's one part. Second, to adopt a resolution of intent to vacate the South Sussex bypass right away that cuts diagonally through block 32 of Homevale Addition and the public utility easement that was created when the alley was vacated, as shown on Exhibit 8, and subject to conditions of approval, and to set a public hearing for July 18th. So my question for, I guess, Jeremy, Aaron, is can we continue this conversation, answer some more questions before the 18th of July?
Yes, so in the packet, there are 2 resolutions that we're asking for your approval of today. So one is the resolution to vacate one is the resolution of intent to vacate the right of way, and the other is the resolution to remove the Sussex connector from the urban system. So if you approve that today or on Monday formally, we would be moving ahead with that resolution to take the connector off of the urban system. And we would be setting a hearing for the public right-of-way vacation. So there's additional time before the public hearing to look at conditions, to have a little bit more discussion about how those numbers were arrived at.
Great, that's what I wanted to get at. Sandra, you made the motion. Are you comfortable with that process?
Yeah, if you guys are, I am.
Okay. All right, I just didn't want to get things even more complicated. Mike and then Aaron.
Thanks. And I will keep most of my comments for the public hearing. I did want to ask a question to staff that doesn't have to be answered today, but I'd like an answer before the public hearing. And that is, what's the process on when stuff goes to MRA and when it goes to council? Because I feel like it's odd to me that MRA gave this project its blessing before we had a chance to talk about it. And I know that what MRA is signing off on is different than what we're signing off on, but it feels like one board is leading the other board, and it's maybe not the direction it should be. I do think that on the affordable housing conversation, it's a fine balance, and I certainly share your desires, Councilman Carlino, to have more affordable housing. And my questions about the roundabout lead that way. I do think, kind of, if you're doing the math that you're talking about with the 100,000 over 35 years, it comes out to about 2,800 a year per unit, and I think that that's a pretty good investment. But further, this isn't a project that has to be an affordable housing project. So the fact that we've got 20 is a good place to start. And I just want to be careful that we don't put expectations on that makes it unable to be developed, because there is a threshold there where developers can't do it. So that's all I've got today.
Right. Okay, thank you. Aaron.
Yeah, I just want to clarify a couple of scheduling things so everyone is aware, because the timing is sort of critical for the MPO process and the city process to proceed at the rate it's going. So the council action to adopt the resolution of intent and to adopt the resolution to remove from the urban system will happen on Monday, June 27th. And the reason that we schedule it that way is so that we could have this discussion, have some intention by city council to move this forward, but that we have the MPO's request to remove from the urban system to attach to city council's resolution that we attached to the agenda today. And so the order that things will happen is essentially that resolution and the resolution of intent will be adopted on Monday, the 27th. And I think that could be, whether that's on the consent agenda or not. I just want to make sure that everyone's clear that it's not going to be next Monday. And then that gives us time to go to TPCC next Tuesday, get TPCC's action to recommend removal. All of this will get packaged up, assuming the right-of-way vacation goes through the hearing and is approved at the final consideration on July 25th. And then it will go to the Transportation Commission for that urban system removal in August. So that's sort of what we're trying to shoot for, is to make sure we can line those things up appropriately. So just to be clear, and for sort of the record for this meeting, that is the schedule that's in the referral, and that is what we're recommending.
Okay, so the resolution and intent to vacate is one part of it. The conversation about the affordability condition attached to the development is another one. And that, so when we vote today on the motion that is on the floor, is for the resolution and intent to vacate, to move forward, and for the affordability component to the development to be a continued discussion with a public hearing set on the 18th of July.
And to adopt the resolution to vacate, or resolution to remove Sussex from the urban system. There's two resolutions associated with the motion.
Okay, Are we all clear as mud on this? I just want to make sure that everyone understands that the discussion about affordability will continue before anything gets voted on. So if we're comfortable with that, I would like us to take a vote. But before that, I'm gonna let Katie set me straight on this.
Yeah, so I think what's probably best if we bring this item back for next committee, just to have that extra time, if that's something you all are interested in.
I think we should do that just to make sure that this is fresh in our brains and we have all the questions ready and answers. But I want to make sure that for Erin's process that this is still gonna work for your time frame.
Yes, yeah, I think ideal for all of this to sort of move in smoothly together. Adopting those two resolutions on the council on Monday, the 27th should work well for our schedules.
Okay, thank you, Katie. So let's put this on our committee agenda for next week. So we don't have to vote on it today. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Okay, but we still have that motion on the floor that we can pick up next week. Is that okay, Ms. Vasika?
Yes, I was just unsure if I needed to rescind my motion or not.
I think we just
Sounds
leave
like
it
everything is
open.
hunky-dory, so we'll just leave it like that.
Okay. Okay, Annie, your hand's up.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify two pieces. I understand you're no longer voting on this today, but I heard the comment a couple of times about 100,000 per unit. I just want to be really clear that the MRA action, and this was a conditional approval. We were very clear that with the applicant that the MRA action was conditioned upon the right-of-way vacation, approval of that, and approval of any changes to the system. So that, and the second piece, I just want to be really clear, is that the MRA funding would go to the public improvements, not to the units themselves or any of the vertical construction. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay. Thank you, everyone. We will pick this up again next week so we can have all the answers to the questions that we have. We invite the developer and representative to join us next week also, and we will have CPDI join us too to answer questions around the affordability component of this. Okay, thank you. And with that, we'll move now to our second item on the agenda. That is a Complete Streets and Neighborhood Traffic Management Program 2022 project update, and Ben Weiss is here to present.
Thank you, Chairwoman Becerra. I will try and make this presentation quick and leave room for as much room for discussion as possible. I'm also under the understanding that this is the last meeting of the day, so if we go a little over, maybe that's not a terrible thing, but I will do what I can to make this as fast as possible. So I am presenting on a handful of projects that are coming through. We're doing them in the next few months that have come through a variety of ways that we put projects together, and just wanted to give council an update. They've all had some interesting feedback from the public, concerns, support, misgivings. So just wanted to make sure that we are kind of doing right by our policies and plans. So a quick reminder on some of our transportation policy and goals, which are set in our long range transportation plan, our complete streets policy, some of the other supporting plans like our facilities, our bicycle facilities master plan, our pedestrian facilities master plan. We have a neighborhood traffic management program to help guide our decisions. But our big picture vision is that our current rates of how we get around are about 71–72% driving alone. And if we looking into the future at the way that we're growing, if we continue those drive alone rates, our network breaks down in places and we don't have the funding available to make it work at that. And so in order to provide mobility, safety, accessibility for everyone in Missoula, as we continue to grow, we actually need to reduce the drive alone rates pretty significantly. Our adopted goals are that we're going to cut it in half, that we're going to get to 34% driving alone by 2045, and triple and quadruple our bike, walk, and transit mode shares by that time. I'd say even if we hit half of those goals, we're going to be in good shape, but going down the road that we are is going to be detrimental to our transportation network. So our complete streets policy, this is a slide about developing projects. Just a quick reminder that we take community plans. We do a lot of public process up front in the planning stages. We get citizen requests. We do things during ongoing maintenance, and we have our community investment program, the CIP, to help guide the kind of major infrastructure projects that the city initiates. Our complete streets policy says that the city shall approach every transportation improvement and project phase as an opportunity to create safer, more accessible streets for all users, and that really guides a lot of our thinking when it's time to everything. When, you know, if we're redesigning South Avenue west of Reserve to how we're going to stripe a crosswalk or a bike lane following a chip seal project. And so the projects that we're going to talk about kind of fall in between that, in between those. And another quick reminder that our neighborhood traffic management program is a kind of set process for responding to traffic safety requests that is a little bit more data driven. We're also utilizing quick build solutions to try and solve some of these issues if warranted, faster and for less money. We've developed some operational goals and street types, and we're looking to do more work around this, but within the kind of local streets that we have some say over, we have neighborhood greenways, local streets, and residential collectors that all have different target speeds, target volumes, design vehicles that we think about, and therefore types of treatments that might be available to us. So as a reminder, the top scorer in the CIP list is the West Side Area Mobility Project. And this is basically the area bounded by Orange Street to the east, Scott Street to the west, Broadway to the south, and Tula Railroad to the north. So a subset of the entire West Side, but an area that is close to downtown, yet also has a diverse mix of uses and its own character in its own right. So these project components include intersection improvements at Alder and Toole, Alder and Orange, Owen and Broadway, Owen and Front, a redesign of the parking lot and access to the North Side pedestrian bridge up there, sidewalk completion and connection to the trail over kind of in the western part of this area. Now that the railroad bridge over Broadway is looking more feasible as a bike ped bridge, making sure that that intersection is considered. Adding bike lanes to Spruce Street and doing some sidewalk improvements and traffic calming improvements on Alder. So the first phase of this project is happening alongside, so even though this is a CIP project, the first phase is happening with regular maintenance. This summer, our streets division is chip sealing Spruce and doing some asphalt repair and chip seal on Alder. And so we see this as kind of the opportunity to get the first phase of this West Side Area Mobility Project completed, restriping Spruce Street to include bike lanes, and then doing an interim striping project on Alder to help us plan and design the permanent improvements along that. And so the concept here, this is an overview, to restripe Spruce with bike lanes, it will require parking removal from one side of the street. It's a kind of typical thing that we do. This is a look at some of the numbers by block, how many we'd be losing. With Alder happens to be one of the widest streets in town. And so the opportunity there is to add, to convert the parking there from parallel to angle and add spaces. It actually results in a net gain of 15 parking spaces to the neighborhood as currently designed. The interim project would add 11 spaces. The permanent project would add 15. Diving into a little more detail, looking kind of block by block at this, we would be preserving parking on the south side of the street, eliminating it from the north side of the street, adding bike lanes in each direction. Other than that, the design is pretty straightforward and pretty much the same as it is today. The bike lane would drop as you approach the intersection. Bike riders would be more invited to share the left side of the right turn lane on the approach to Orange. That would line up with the bike lane on the far side of the street. On Alder, this is the interim striping plan. So it's converting the parallel parking to angled parking. These blue dots that you see here, hopefully, are plastic delineators that would create bulb outs, shortening the crossing distance, making pedestrians more visible to drivers on the street, and narrowing the roadway down to reduce some of the speeds. Alder, because it's so wide, sees much higher speeds than we would typically see on a local residential street today. One of the other things that we looked at was stop configuration, and we look at converting stop signs that are currently on Owen, converting them to Alder instead at that intersection, letting Owen be the through street as it's a direct connection from the north side Ped Bridge down to the to Ron's River Trail. And then finally, clearing up some of the confusion at this intersection with Orange, where you have the spur that goes up to Railroad and then the main Orange Street that goes down to the underpass. We would extend the barrier between those again in the interim, just through paint and plastic delineators. We'd create a little median here, again, out of paint and plastic delineators and some bulb outs. So we'd narrow the crossing distance. We would make this little spur of Orange Street southbound one way only. And we would really guide the right turns off of Orange Street a little bit more. So we think that this has the benefit of slowing traffic and potentially even reducing some of the cut through traffic that we're seeing from people coming off of Orange Street and heading to points further west. The permanent improvements as currently conceived kind of make the temporary, the interim striping more permanent. Although we would look at that time converting to back-in angle instead of pull-in angle. It's safer for drivers, for people biking. It is and arguably uses less space. The reason we wouldn't do that with the striping project is that the curb currently is too high in a lot of places, and we're concerned that people would hit their bumpers or mufflers on that. And so that's something we'd look at doing in a more permanent design. Also a more permanent design, we would look at correcting the intersection here at Milton and Toole, where it's currently kind of a free-for-all, and there's a crash history there, including a fatality nearby, a bike fatality back in 2007. We would narrow up the crossing, make the approaches much more squared up, and we'd even be able to add in some parking there. We'd have a clear pedestrian access to the park. And also what we would do with this process is identify and define accessible parking space locations, at least one per block as we go through. So the public process for this, we sent out postcards, mailings to every property owner in the vicinity back in March, and we held a couple public meetings. There was decent attendance, about a dozen people at each meeting that we had. Overall, there was gratitude for the attention being paid to the neighborhood. There were comments that they feel close enough to downtown that it can be treated like downtown without some of the investment that downtown has seen. And so they were thankful to be considered. There's a general appreciation of the city's goals of, increasing the amounts of people biking, walking, taking the bus, reducing the people driving alone. Some of the concerns are that adding angled parking on the residential street could make their street have higher levels of traffic, make it feel more like a parking lot, or that there's it's not what some of the residents would want to see. There's parking removal on Spruce Street. Some people are concerned that that might lead to people looking for spaces elsewhere, and that was what we were trying to mitigate by adding spaces to Alder. But again, that has some people concerned. And then trade-offs between bike route comfort and convenience. One thing we heard was like, well, what if bikes were sent on Alder or on Railroad instead? But Spruce Street is in all of our plans as being, it is the through route. There's already bike lanes east of Orange and west of the roundabout on Toole. It connects through downtown to the Rattlesnake to the east. And down Tool and to points west. We have plans to, get people all the way out to the Swipticane area safely and conveniently. And it really spruces a noticeable gap in the network right now. So our proposed course of action is to stripe the proposed interim configuration as planned following the summer's chip seal. Our goal is to measure speeds, volumes, and parking utilization before and after the installation. We do have speeds and volumes from a couple of years ago, but really kind of see if test our assumptions that we think that by narrowing the usable space on the road, it will slow traffic, and by adding some traffic calming features and switching up one of those stop sign configurations, that will reduce the cut through volumes. And we want to maintain communication with the neighborhood post installation and hear from them about what they are experiencing, if they think that some of their fears are coming to fruition, or if maybe they like it after the fact. And we'll use the data to inform our construction project design, which we anticipate to be taking place roughly in 2024 or so. I have a couple other projects to talk about, but I'm happy to pause here and take questions or comments about this one before I get to the others.
Thanks, Ben. Any questions from council members? Okay, Jennifer.
I just wondering when we'll call for public comment, Merta, just a procedural question.
I was just thinking about that my guess is that a lot of the people in attendance are here for this particular project. So Ben, how much longer are the other two projects so that you can wrap it up and then we can just focus on this one?
Okay, I can just move quickly through the others if that's what you'd prefer.
Let's do that so we can finish this part, and then I'll move to public comment and council questions. And I apologize in advance that we are going to go a little bit longer, but we'll try to be brief.
Okay.
Thanks.
Another two streets on our maintenance list this year are Greeno Drive and Lolo Street in the Rattlesnake, both of which are kind of regular. We hear about pretty regularly, asking for some attention. On Lolo, it's more speeding concerns and lack of bike facilities. On Greeno, it's lack of bike facilities. Well, really both of them, it's speeding concerns and lack of bike facilities. So Lolo Street, our initial proposal was to use a relatively new treatment to North America called an edge lane road. This is what you do. This is a treatment that is available on lower volume streets up to 6,000 cars a day, essentially. Lolo Street sees about 2,500, where you stripe an advisory bike lane, a dashed bike lane line on the outside, and you have a narrower than typical center lane that is shared by vehicles in opposing directions. And those signs, these are examples of some signs that communities have developed to explain how this works. When two cars are coming towards each other, they should move out of each other's way using the bike lane when it's safe. It's a way to, one way that people talk about it is that you're using some minimal striping to create the psychological encouragement for what people do currently when roads are totally unstriped. We think that this would be a great first edge lane road in Missoula. It's already been adopted as our official design for California Street when that gets rebuilt between 3rd and River Road. But it's a new tool in the toolkit, and we think that Lolo would be a great candidate as well. But in this case, we went to Rattlesnake Transportation Committee meetings. Again, there was general appreciation of what we're trying to do. And while some people were very supportive and enthusiastic about doing an edge lane road trial on Lolo, there was also a fair amount of confusion and skepticism about how it would operate. And so at this time, we are recommending we're going to pull back from the full implementation. Instead, we are going to just add the bare minimum of what we need to for striping this year, which is the lane lines as you approach Rattlesnake Drive and as you approach Greeno. And we're going to leave the street bare and collect more data and see if that has any impact. The psychology there is that there is some thought that the double yellow line that's there creates tunnel vision for folks and leads to higher speeds. And if you erase those lines, then people are paying more attention to their surroundings. And so we're going to test that, monitor performance, and adjust the design as needed in future years. The final project I wanted to talk about was Norman's Lane and Simons Drive in the South Hills and Farview's Patty Canyon area. We've received citizen requests for the past few years for speed control. There are very high speeds on both streets, despite being low volume. The averages are in the 30-mile-an-hour range, and the 85ths are as high as 35 on these streets. We even saw a maximum of 75 in our count window on Simons Drive, a residential street with no sidewalks or not continuous sidewalks. They have high crash rates for low volume streets. There have been, the numbers are not that high. 4 crashes in 5 years on Simons Drive, but when you only have 300 cars a day on it, that crash rate is about 6 times the crash rate of, say, South Avenue and Reserve when you look at per million vehicles. And so, per the neighborhood traffic management program, this says that something should be done. There are topography considerations, and there's lack of continuous sidewalks. There's also, it's not on the grid. We don't have the opportunity to put circles in the way that we might in more of our flat neighborhood streets. So our proposal here are using speed humps. We successfully implemented some on Missoula Ave and the Rattlesnake last year. These are very different than speed bumps, the kind of archaic design that you find in parking lots at malls across the country. Instead, these are wider, gentler, and they typically have been shown to reduce speeds to 15 to 20 miles per hour, not just at the location where the speed hump is, but where along the course of it, because people aren't jarred and because you're not slowing down to a near stop at the point of the device, people just generally get the message that they should go slower here. So we had public meetings about this as well. Simons Drive had lots of engagement for being a relatively low density street. There were a lot of property owners came out. There was general support to slow traffic, but again, there were a couple people who were pretty confused or they kept referring to them as speed bumps. And so I think that even though we tried to explain the difference, I think that they were still picturing that. But there was some skepticism around the design, operation, and location. But there was also a lot of support for them as well. Norman's Lane, there was minimal response, but we did have support for the project as proposed. So our course of action is, develop speed hump placement location, communicate back with the neighborhood prior to implementation, and install them as material availability allows. I'm not sure if this committee fully understands how there's an asphalt shortage in Missoula right now. I don't know that I fully understand it, but there's only one plant available, and we are having trouble getting the asphalt that we need to do the projects that we need to do this year. But we want to then collect data and revisit if needed. So with all of these, it is, again, we believe that we are following and implementing our plans policies to achieve the goals adopted by council. But because there has been some public pushback on these, we wanted to bring them forward just as examples of the type of work we're doing and the conversations that we're hearing and having with folks, and just make sure that we are on the, doing this the way that you think that we should be doing it.
Thank you, Ben. You can take a deep breath now. Okay, so I am going to go to the public first because they have been patiently awaiting all this time. So members of the public, please do raise your hand. I understand if council members need to leave the meeting. My apologies again for running longer, but this is important for us to hear from the neighbors about potential changes. So with that, let's see. Ben, could you stop sharing your screen, please? Thank you. Thank you. Okay, and I see Frank Vasquez. You can go ahead and unmute.
Unmute. Okay.
Hey, there you are.
This is Anita Vasquez.
Oh, hi, Anita.
His computer. The speed humps that when you come on Simons from High Parkway, an important place, if you want to put one, is right I think it's right before it turns. There's room to put one, and people start coming around that bend fast. I've seen them, they turn and they swerve around and they can't see people or pedestrians coming from the other direction. And I think that's one place that would be good to put one on signs.
Okay. Thanks for your comment, Anita.
Okay.
Next, I'm gonna go to Lido Vizzuti.
Hello, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yep, we can hear you.
I will probably not jump on what you'll probably hear from our other members of the 500 block of West Alder. My name is Lido. I live on the 500 block of West Alder, and I'll be specifically speaking to angle parking. And thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee and attending City Council members. We've been in communication with Ben and Aaron, and they've been open about meeting with us, and as has Jen Savage, our City Council representative, and Heidi West. I maintain that the plan as presented will create over congestion on our street, is a less safe environment for my family and my neighbors and those with driveways. Does not consider the stakeholders, all the stakeholders in this project, specifically those of us on 500 block of West Alder, is not in line with Missoula's overall growth values or transportation goals, including encouraging alternative forms of transportation. If we want to have less folks driving, packing in as much parking in front of my house doesn't seem to be the way to get there necessarily. When it comes to safety, this seems to be more of a plan to mitigate the loss of parking on Spruce by maximizing the high density parking in front of my home. As it concerns with Alder, the plan strictly caters to those transient population of workers looking for a free place to park and does not represent the opinion of the people who live here. The trial period or interim configuration as presented, I don't believe is long enough to make an accurate assessment of whether the safety or volume safety goes up or volume declines due to the lack of consideration of the growth over the next 5 years. And then, I'm sorry, I'm just kind of blazing through here as I know you're all tired of being on Zoom. And the speed of this project is moving at such a speed and moving through that it really hasn't given us time to bring our concerns to the full City Council. And so a question I would have is that, post this meeting, how does this plan move forward? And is there a point where we will have additional places for public comment? And I do want to say thank you to Ms. Savage for keeping keeping on top of this issue on our behalf and for helping us express our concerns to the city as our council representative. I have so much more to say about it, but I assume that more of my neighbors will talk to other points or reiterate some things that I've said. I wasn't expecting to go first, but if you have questions, anyone is welcome to reach out to me or really probably anyone on our block directly, and we're happy to discuss our issues further. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Next, I see Luke. Luke, you can go ahead and unmute.
I think I did. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right, Luke Banky, also on the 500 block of Alder. I would echo a lot of what Lido said. We just don't want a parking lot in front of our house. And our 500 block there, it's all residential. I know it's not zoned that way, but it's just families that live there. And we are sympathetic with the city's goals, but we were hoping that there might be some kind of other strategy or creative solution that can deal with some of the parking storage issues that take into account all the stakeholders, because right now we're feeling very much like we're just getting rolled over. And I mean, it's primarily currently it's primarily parking storage for two businesses, St. Pat's and Partnership. And you know, when you move parking off of Spruce, that's where they're going to go. They're going to go to Alder. And I understand they have needs as well, but we would like to be considered as part of that stakeholder group. And hopefully there's some other alternate plan or some other way that we can satisfy some of the needs of everyone. That's pretty much all I have to say.
Thanks, Luke, for your comments. See, next I see Sasha and Jesse Lawler.
Hey there, thank you. This is Jesse. I would just like to agree with Luke and Lido, and reiterate their points, and add, putting the angled parking would fundamentally alter the character of this old street, wide street in Missoula, and really change the entire feel of the neighborhood. It's, you wouldn't take the median out of Pine and make that parking. We don't have a beautiful median, but we do like our street there. So yeah, I just want to agree with them, and thank you guys for taking the time to listen to our concerns.
Thank you, Jesse. Let's see, next I see Lido's hand up, but I'm gonna go to Jessica because she hasn't had a time to speak. So Jessica, go ahead.
Hello, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Hi, I obviously am the wife of Lido Vizzuti, also on the 500 blog. It's a Vizzuti party here today. So thank you guys for taking all of our comments. I really appreciate it. I just wanted to echo my agreement with my neighbors' concerns. Thank Councilwoman Savage for her listening to us, and also thank everybody here for having comments from us. I was just also going to say that the addition of angled parking on both sides of the street, it feels more dangerous to me in packing more parking into a primarily residential area, even if it does serve our commercial neighbors. I certainly want to be a good neighbor to them, but I'd also ask that in return. And I think that there are several studies that show, including one from the Oregon Department of Transportation in 2001, as well as another from the University of Nebraska, that adding angled parking typically reduces safety on a street, specifically when it is put on both sides, which is what this current plan presents. I'd also like to say that while we've been able to give a lot of feedback in this process, I would argue that none of the residential feedback is currently reflected in the plan as is, which was very disheartening as a citizen to see. I'd like to think that as we do give our feedback, that something would be in there which would form compromise. So I would hope moving forward that this process could slow down. Tomorrow you're going to mill my street, so I know things are moving at a very rapid pace. So I guess I would just ask for more time and more compromise in a new plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. And let's see. Lido, your hand is up again. Is there anything additional that you would like to provide?
No, I just don't think I ever lowered it. Sorry.
Okay, sounds good. I will lower that hand for you. Okay, and okay, Sasha or Jesse, your hand's still up. Is that a residual hand, or do you have anything else to add? Okay, I'm gonna go back now to, let's see, one more. Jill.
Hello, Banky. I'm also on the 500 block, and I just want to show I agree completely with all my neighbors. I don't really have an additional comment. I just want to show that I'm totally on board with their concerns. One small addition would be the bump outs. I drove home today, and right on the corner of Spruce and Tool, there's a little, right by that roundabout, there's a little, I don't know what to call it, like kind of a wedge shape that was landscaped at one point, and it now is a nice, lovely weed garden that makes our neighborhood look really trashy. So if you're going to add those bump outs, I want to be assured that they're going to be maintained. I know there's a temporary plan first, but I'm concerned that it's going to be put in, it'll look nice for a few months, and then by the next spring, it'll just be forgotten about by city maintenance. So if they're going to add extra, I don't want to, have it deteriorate and make our neighborhood look worse. No, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jill. And I am going to move now to our city council. Jennifer, your hand's been up, so go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you to all of the neighbors who have hung in there. This has been a long call. And so I know a lot of it wasn't relevant to this particular topic, but I do want to thank Ben, and I want to thank everybody at Public Works and Transportation for all of the hard work that has gone into these proposals. I would like to point out that there's been significant long-term, thoughtful, and respectful engagement from the neighbors on the 400 and 500 block of Alder. For those of you who don't know, that particular block is still quite residential. Those same blocks on Spruce Street aren't residential in the sense that there are people actually living there. There are still houses there, but most of them have been turned into offices of some sort. And so this particular stretch of Alder is quite residential, and these neighbors have small children. And it's a vibrant neighborhood. It's right, it is in the core of downtown. It is in Ward 1, even though I think the project is called a West Side Transportation Project. And so I think that these neighbors have proposed several different alternatives, and one of which is just not to put angled parking in front of their houses on those two particular blocks that are quite residential. There's a park just down the block. I don't think anyone has any objections to angled parking there or beside the St. Pat's parking lot that's also across the street from the park. I think that it's those particular two blocks that are of issue, and particularly if we're going to have a bike path in Owen that sort of crosses that as well. I question some visibility problems there as someone who actually uses that quite a bit. That's my cut through from the north side to the river on my bike, and I run it probably 3 days a week. So I have concerns about that as well. I don't think, because this is not we're not voting on this, and this is just an informational item procedurally, I have been advised that I can't ask staff to go back and consider an alternative. But that's what I would like to do. I think that there is an alternative that they've drawn up that they've said they can live with. And I would love if we could engage in conversation about that with these neighbors to give them a little bit of a better sense of place in their own neighborhood where they've invested lots of time and resource. And it does feel a little to me that with no compromise on the table, even though I know we've said we've heard these neighbors, it really doesn't appear that way. And it does feel that sort of this comes down to 9 parking spaces, and that those 9 parking spaces, turning the parking into angled parking in front of these people's houses, like really does have a day-to-day negative effect on these neighbors. And 9 parking spaces really just doesn't seem to me that significant in the entirety of the downtown master plan. So I would hope that we can come back to the table and come to some sort of compromise so that at least we feel like that people have their needs have been addressed. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. I'm going to go to Daniel, and then I would like to hear from Ben about next steps. Go ahead, Daniel.
Thanks. Yeah, I was going to just try and ask some of the questions that the public commenters were asking. Yeah, about like next steps and if council does have a say or anything in this. And then could I ask another question after that? Or I guess I'm just asking what the next.
Why don't you ask it now, and then we can just move to what comes next.
I'm just wondering what the next steps are and what if council will be able to weigh in on this proposal or if it's too late.
Okay. Ben.
Where to begin? I guess maybe with a simple and kind of tangential one, the kind of gateway park at Tool and Spruce at that intersection. That was the installation and maintenance of that is on the West Side leadership team, the neighborhood council for the West Side. That project was, yeah, pay that. They raised the money and wrote a grant to do that and signed a maintenance agreement. So that isn't the, city's responsibility necessarily. As for the design, Jennifer mentioned we did consider a design that looks at maintaining the parallel parking on the couple blocks, on the north side of the street of the 500 block and the south side of the street of the 400 block. That would be a difference of 9 parking spaces. It would be 9 fewer parking spaces. So it'd still be a net increase of 2 parking spaces in the short term from the removal of Spruce and increase of 6 in the long term. If we were to design the long-term plan similarly, or somewhere between 2 and 6. And so, but where we ultimately landed is that there's, again, the planning documents, including the downtown master plan, suggests that we really try and maximize that we're going to need new parking north of Broadway and in the kind of western edges of downtown. And the master plan talks a lot about garages, but we know that garages are really expensive, require a ton of public investment. And so by using on-street parking, we think that we can kind of put off that need. But again, and we also know that every time we do a striping project where we add bike lanes and remove parking, there's some amount of heartburn, at least in the short term, about that parking removal. And so we feel like this was kind of our best foot forward. I guess I came to council maybe looking for a little direction on this. And do you want us to kind of compromise on some of those policy directives and add or maintain the parallel parking on those couple blocks for now, or do we, what are we trying to do here?
Good question.
Could I follow up?
Yes, go ahead.
I think compromise would be good. But I think if we did maintain the parallel parking, it would make sense to have a bike lane there, because the wider the streets are, the faster people drive. And that is one thing that would be addressed by doing the diagonal parking, but I'd be open to compromise. But I think making the width of the street shorter is a lot safer for speeds. And then I also wanted to just ask about, somebody brought up a speed hump at the idea of a speed hump at, can't remember what intersection they said. I think it's one of the first commenters, but I was just curious if you heard that comment, Ben, and if you had anything to say to them about that possible speed hump.
Yeah, we're currently proposing speed humps on those streets in the South Hills. I apologize if there was confusion about because we moved all over town in a very quick amount of time on the presentation. We're not currently proposing speed humps on these streets. While they are effective tools, we kind of want to go the route of, or at least in our minds, the route of least invasive project, intervention before stepping it up. And we think of those as stepped up because they do impact emergency services response time and things like that. And so we look at doing other interventions first. Again, anything we do, we're going to measure whether or not it works. And Daniel, I think that you're absolutely right that the width of the street has led to higher speeds and as a result, higher crashes. And there's, average speeds on this street are, 30 miles an hour and higher. And it has like 10 crashes in 5 years from 2015 to 2019. So that's something that we are trying to mitigate the best we can. But if there's appetite for flexibility, I think that we can live with that and still take measurement and, still measure the impacts and look at doing something. If we're not reducing speeds as much as we would like, we could look at increased interventions such as speed humps or something else.
I don't want to keep us too much longer, and this is we're not voting on this, so I'm not entirely sure what the process is for directing staff to look at alternatives and how that gets processed, other than maybe staff working with Ward 1 representatives on finding an alternative. And certainly we need to keep in mind the fact that there is a streets work component that is happening. So I guess I would like to better understand the time frame for this, because I know Brian Hansel and his crew are ready to go. What does that mean for that time frame when you need to make decisions? But I do think that those decisions can happen outside of the city council process, because this is not something that we can vote on. So any kind of middle ground that we can find, I think, can be fine-tuned outside of the city council process and within the administrative process between staff and the neighborhood, assisted by or in collaboration with Ward 1 representative. Is that right? Maybe Jeremy, you can help me understand whether that's the right way to go here, or Ben.
Yeah, I think so. I'll do a brief timeline update too. So Brian he's starting to mill the work. The road work needs to happen whether or not we're contemplating any striping changes. And so that is kind of on his schedule. The complete streets policy dictates that anytime he does that road work, we look at ways to make it safer, more comfortable, and more convenient for everybody. And so that's kind of why this is moving at the speed that it is, because he needs to do the roadway maintenance. But it doesn't mean that it's going to get restriped. You know, he's doing the milling and paving. He's hoping to have that done by July 4th to set him up for chip seal. His chip seal season is the last week of July and the first 2 weeks of August. Then the chips sit on the ground for about 3 weeks before we stripe. So we're talking about late August or early September is when any changes would happen. I think that there's plenty of time to continue working kind of administratively on this. Doesn't need a full council decision. Again, we were just kind of looking for some guidance here of how much flexibility do we have within these various planning documents that have been adopted by council, and what when there are competing interests, is there a direction that you want to provide when there are kind of competing objectives and goals? What is the direction that you want us to go in?
Yep. I'm going to go to Mike because he's been patiently waiting.
Thank you. I appreciate the information, and I certainly would support, if there's a pragmatic compromise to be reached that makes everybody happy and meets our goals, that's great. But in the bigger picture, I think it's worth considering if we have a policy in place where the planning documents we've adopted on the broad level conflict with maybe the immediate local desires of one street. And I'm not saying that the neighbors on that one street should override the bigger plan, but how do we discuss that? Because I know I heard from multiple residents on Simons in my ward that the topic of speed on that street has been on their mind, and they thought there was going to be a process. And then they got postcards that basically said, this is what we're doing, come to a meeting where we really can't change our mind. And I mean, it just seems like if enough people are impacted, similar like maybe how we do zoning protests, like there's a circuit breaker or something where, hey, we do need to consider this. If enough immediate people are impacted on something where we adopted a broad plan. So I would kind of put that out there as something for broader consideration.
Yeah, thanks. Jeremy?
Thanks. I wanted to speak to process a little bit. Council sets policy, and our job as staff is to implement those policies. And the two guiding documents that we're using are the complete streets policy and the downtown master plan for this project. And so staff has come up with a recommendation that we think embodies those policies. We are looking for that feedback from council to say, are we on the right track here? Because there is room for interpretation. But in this case, to Mike's point, which is spot on, there is the the impact to the immediate residents, and then there's the broader impact to the public and to the public good. And one of the things the downtown plan says very clearly is to look at increasing parking supply in that area north of Broadway and west of Orange Street. And so in looking at the parking removal on Spruce Street, we wanted to find ways to replace that parking supply. And that's important to downtown health, because downtown doesn't require parking to be provided privately. And so all of the investment that happens in downtown is really reliant on public parking. And so that supply of public parking is important to always be thinking about. And we want to encourage people to use other modes and shift so that we're not solely reliant on cars. But the reality is there's still a big need for parking in downtown, and we have to continue to balance that out. So I do think there's room to work through this. One of the advantages of the project as it's currently proposed is it's an interim design. So we'll have the opportunity to look at it, see how it works, and then adjust it before we make any permanent improvements. And so our recommendation is to go forward with that and take a look at it over the next year or so before we make any final decisions.
Okay. Jennifer.
Thanks, Jeremy. I appreciate that. And I do understand that you all are working, through working with, documents that City Council has adopted and that policy is there. I do also appreciate that those are guiding documents and that there is often room in those to wiggle. And I think I hear you about, parking in the health of downtown, but also in the health of downtown is thriving families that are safe in their homes. And so I would, as the Ward 1 representative, if it's possible, I would like to ask city staff to look at a compromise project. And I'm happy to help work administratively to help figure that out with neighbors and with staff.
Yeah, I think that I will leave it to you and Ben to work with the neighbors, coming up with some solution. If you want to bring it back to council and get further conversation and discussion, I think that's fine, but I'm not entirely sure how the process time-wise would fit in with additional discussion on this. But having said that, if we can find a way to collaborate with the neighbors, I personally feel that we have guiding documents that we have spent a lot of time looking at. But I also believe in incremental changes. I think change is really hard for people when it comes so suddenly and so drastically. So, if we can work towards getting to our goals that we have set in our policies, I think that's definitely the right direction. But how fast we move and how flexible we are, I think it's also really important. So definitely room for more conversation around this. But we are so out of time, and I owe a huge apology to everyone, including staff, for staying way past our time. So with that, I think Ben and Jennifer, if you can work, outside of the council on this issue, that would be great. Does that sound good?
It does. I know that we're late already, but I think that Jessica put her hand back up, and I'm wondering if there's a final neighborhood comment.
Yes. Jessica, you can unmute.
Oh, yeah. Hi. Well, I guess I would just say after that, I'm thrilled to hear that the conversation will continue between the two of you. And I would have a question, actually, which just in the timeline, and you might not know the answer, but do things stay on the same timeline, or is that adjusted now as the conversation continues?
I don't see why the timeline would change. We still need to do some sort of striping following the chip seal, and the construction season is limited in its window, and the pavement needs preserved. The thing with roadway maintenance is that if you let it go too long, then it costs exponentially more money to rebuild the street than just doing the asphalt work. So yeah, I don't think that timeline changes at all. I think that we'll continue the conversation.
Cool. All right. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Okay. everyone, apologies again, and go enjoy the sunshine that's left and in the day. And thank you very much. I'm gonna adjourn this meeting.